Adele is taking a break, guys. Adele is taking a break, and sadly, we all know what that means. When an artist that releases an album every 40 years says they're going on a break, that usually means that we're going to be left with no new albums, no new singles, not even any live performances for at least another decade. It's a shame because I actually thought that we were going to get a new album next year because 30 was released all the way back in 2021. That's 3 years ago already. Next year is going to be 4 years, and that's usually the amount of time it takes her to release a new album. So I thought, we were getting 33 or 34 next year, but apparently we're gonna have to wait till 45 to get a new album. I've been a fan of hers for the longest time. I remember being maybe 10 years old and buying my first CD ever, and that was her album 21, driving my mom crazy, trying to sing the songs all day long, making the house a loud mess. I remember also that one of my first videos I ever uploaded to this channel was a review of her album back in 2021, the album 30. It wasn't really the most favorable review, I do have to say that, but nowadays I can understand the lyrical concept of the album and what she was actually trying to do with that record a bit more. And since we don't really know how long this break is going to be, I thought that a nice idea for a video, kind of like a send-off to one of the most amazing female singers of the 2010s, would be ranking her discography from worst to best, and that is exactly what I'm gonna do here. It's a little weird. Usually when I do these videos, I do it with like 8 albums, 10 albums with larger discographies, and now I only have 4. So maybe this video is going to be slightly shorter than usual, so I do apologize for that. I want to know your own experiences with Adele's music, your own personal opinion on her discography, and the placement I gave the albums on my list. So go ahead and leave a comment down below, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and leave a like on the video if you enjoyed. I don't really want this video to be that long, so let's just go on with the first album, shall we? The problem when you're ranking Adele's albums is that it doesn't really matter which album you put where. People are most likely going to disagree with you, but ever since I conceived the idea of making this video, I knew that 30 was going to be the last placement on the list, mainly because I think that there was a lot of unexplored ideas in this album. She tried to expand her sound palette quite a bit, and in the process kind of lost a lot of the focus most of her previous albums had, and that for me is a big issue. I feel like a lot of the songs here are very disconnected from each other because she's trying to play around with a lot of different styles of instrumentation. You do have her typical ballads, this time with a more vocal jazz approach, with a more vintage approach, the type of instrumentation you'd find back in the 50s in songs like Strangers by Nature, which is actually one of my favorite songs in the album. Easy on Me is probably one of her best ballads. I mean, the way that song flows, her vocals, the control she has over every single note is impressive. And then My Little Love is a really good exploration of what being a mom feels like, her relationship with her son, how the fame seems to be getting in the way, even though she tries her best for that not to be the case. There's a lot of good things about the first few tracks in this album. The problem is that after that, the sound palette becomes a big blur. You have elements of dance pop music thrown in the mix, fast-paced acoustic pieces, and then you even have lo-fi R&B, the types you'd find on YouTube when you're trying to find study music. And the problem is not that she's trying to bring this new types of instrumentation into her album. The problem is that she doesn't really capitalizes on it, so you'd find that the level of expertise in her typical ballads, and she has quite a few on this album, is way better and way higher, and she sounds a lot more proficient in those than in this experiments, in this weird instances where she's trying to separate herself from the soul formula she had on previous albums, and that leads to songs like Cry Your Heart Out, Oh My God, and also the All Night Parking interlude that it's actually one of my favorite moments in the album, but once again feels very disconnected from the rest of the track list. However, the fact that I'm putting this album so low on the list is only a testament of the quality of her work. This is still one of the greatest albums released in 2021. It's a really good example of a famous person trying to have normal relationships with their family, with their friends, but not really being able to do so because you have 1,000 eyes on you at all times. But not in a pretentious or humble bragging style. She's actually very grounded when talking about these themes, and she knows she's very lucky to have the life she has, but at the same time, being famous comes with hardships that the general public doesn't really know or is alienated to, so she paints a really good picture of that situation in this album. Her voice sounds clean in every single one of these songs, and her performance is incredible as always. My personal favorite song in this album would be Love Is a Game, because I feel like she's reminiscing not only about her own life experiences, but also her entire career, how she always used to talk about love and heartbreak, and that was basically the epicenter of her entire musical career. career, but she doesn't really regret it. You know, she wants to move on from it. She's trying to go for bigger and better things in this album, but she doesn't really regret anything she's done in the past in her previous records. And I think that's a beautiful way to end the album for the most part. Really good track list, an amazing level of production, quality in the performance, and overall proficiency when it comes to putting this album together. The only problem is that she tried to go for more than she could handle, definitely, because she wasn't able to connect all of these different styles together. It doesn't really sound good. It's more like a compilation rather than an actual album. That is the reason why it stays in number 4. For the bronze medal, I was kind of debating if I wanted to put this album here because in my opinion this album is a little bit underrated. I know it's kind of hard to say that because this album sold millions of records. It's actually in the top 20 best debut selling albums of all time, and that is an impressive feat considering all the amazing debuts we've had in the history of music. But when people think about Adele, I think it's safe to say that they often go for 21 and 25, the songs in those albums, and a lot of people see this as an introduction to Adele when it's so much more than that. She was 19 when she not only performed but also wrote the songs in this album, and that is remarkable. I also feel like the lyrics in this album are very important because even though they sound the same and they look the same as the one from 21 and 25, in here is a 19-year-old, not really that famous Adele singing these songs. You know, it's the very first heartbreak she ever went through, and I think that's important because it's more reactive, it's more urgent, as we see in songs like Chasing Pavements, for example, or Innocent in songs like Daydreamer and First Love. I do believe that the same issue we saw in 30 about the tracks not really connecting well with each other is present in this album too. There's tracks that have a whole band behind the instrumentation and then shift into a very thin instrumental, you know, for example, the track Melt My Heart to Stone, going from that to the lullaby-ish instrumentation of First Love, it's quite noticeable and it doesn't really feel like it flows very well. There's also the fact that the production is kind of rough on this album. You know, her voice, sometimes when you hit those high notes, gets kind of distorted and it doesn't really sound as clean as albums like 21, 25, and 30, and again, that's quite noticeable because her performance is the main catch of any of her albums, you know, not only this one. I also feel like this album could probably be higher if not for the songs My Same and Tired. Those songs have no place in an album like this. This was supposed to be a soulful exploration of teenage heartbreak, and instead you have these songs that fall more on the pop side of things. Nothing wrong with that, but again, they don't really match the mood of the album, and that is the main reason why I believe they kind of lower the quality of the record overall. But apart from that, I have to say that the track list is amazing. Hometown Glory is an amazing song. Daydreamer is a beautiful introduction to her performance style. Chasing Pavements, a really good song too, and the amazing Bob Dylan cover, Make You Feel My Love. There's a lot of great things to say about this album, but I do have to move on with the video, and the only reason why I didn't put this album higher is mainly because of those two songs I don't like, the way that some tracks here don't really connect with each other that well, and some issues in the production side of things, but overall this is an impressive record, one of the best albums released in 2008. And there's also the fact that the two albums we're about to talk about right now are some of the best albums of the last decade, so yeah, let's go on with those. I have to say that the two albums we're about to talk about right now are interchangeable depending on how you want to approach the review. If we base it on the quality of each song individually, I think that 25 would probably take the win, but because we're talking about the albums as a whole, you know, how they connect with each other, how each track fulfills a role in the album, I feel like I have to put 25 at number 2, but this is still an amazing album. I remember when it was released how huge this album was, how many amazing songs came in this record. You have the incredible ballad Hello, one of her most climatic songs ever. Said My Love is a really good way of using her soulful vocals in a more rhythmic and danceable tune. I love that song. I believe her song When We Were Young is one of her most beautiful in terms of lyrics, if not the most beautiful. I love Love in the Dark, Million Years Ago, All I Ask, Sweetest Devotion. Every single song in this album is incredible. So why is it at number 2 and not at number 1? Well, mainly because there's one song in here that I don't really like, and that doesn't really happen in the album 21. I don't really like I Miss You. I think the song has no place in this album, and if not for this track, it probably would be at number 1. 21 is one of the most consistent albums in terms of quality, so if you want to be above it, you have to offer the same kind of consistency or balanced level of quality, and sadly, because of this one song and because of the way some songs here connect with each other, 25 doesn't really offer that. Sometimes you have have one of the most epic, elegant, and beautiful songs ever. And then you have River Lee, which again is not a highlight of this album. It offers a lot of balance in terms of the overall quality of the record. I know I'm repeating myself, but that's pretty much the only issue I have with this album. Other than that, it's one of the greatest releases from the 2010s. It's a beautiful exploration of love from a more mature and adult point of view. It's kind of interesting analyzing the lyrics in this album and noticing that this time around she's the one apologizing. She's the one who hurt somebody and she's trying to get back with that person, which places this album at a really special place in her discography, because all of her other records are basically, she's the one getting hurt. She's the one trying to deal with the pain. This time around, she has to find a way to take that pain away from somebody else. And that is a really interesting lyrical concept that makes this album even more special. But once again, I just feel like the only reason why this album is not higher is because 21 was such a declaration of proficiency when performing in a particular genre. Instead, in this album, she tries to deviate from that genre while still maintaining the same essence. And though for the most part she succeeds, and this is still an amazing listen, I don't think that is enough to say that this album is better than number one. Because at number one, we not only have one of the most acclaimed and best-selling albums of all time, we also have a record with the most beautiful songs ever written. The level of elegance, proficiency, and detail she puts in every single lyric and note is incredible, and that's the reason why 21 is one of my personal favorite albums of all time. I personally believe that this album doesn't really get all the praise it deserves. I know that when it was released, it was in everyone's mouth, and everyone was praising Adele for what she did with this album, and it was placed in multiple lists of the greatest albums of all time. But as the years go by, I feel like people keep forgetting a little bit more and more about this album, and I don't see any reason for that to happen, because this is a modern classic. This is the modern classic. There's no other album released around that same time that impacted the world in such a way while maintaining the same essence that made that artist famous in the first place. Because I think people forget that this album basically popularized vinyl albums again in the 2010s, when the streaming era was starting to become more and more relevant. When making albums wasn't as important as making hits that would hit the top of the chart to make you fill out arenas. She was doing an album where every song shares just about the same level of quality. There's clear highlights in here, like Someone Like You, one of the greatest songs of all time in my opinion, a beautiful ballad, Rolling in the Deep, Set Fire to the Rain, Turning Tables, Rumor Has It. Her expertise when it comes to performing in this album, she mastered the soulful formula of performing these songs, but she single-handedly changed the way the music industry worked back in 2011. She released an album where the musical expertise, the quality of the songs, the quality of the performance, the talent that she showcased all throughout this entire track list is the main catch of the album. It's not one particular song topping the charts and making everyone dance, and becoming viral. No, it's every single song on this album. The only reason why some songs in this album are more popular than others, like the ones I mentioned before, is because they're singles, okay? Not because they're better than any other song in here, because once again, the level of quality is very balanced and leveled. You don't feel bored at any point listening to this album. You don't feel like you want to skip a song. Every song is important to create the 21 experience. And even in albums like 25, which I already said that I love, I find myself being a little bored at times. That doesn't happen in 21. I love every minute of this album, and that's the reason why I wanted to put it at number one. I think that many of the memories I have with this album may influence the fact that I think this album is so much better than 25. Maybe the fact that as the years go by, I find myself being more and more related to a lot of the things that she was saying in this album. There's quite a few reasons why I would put this album at number one, but ultimately, I think that from an artistic point of view, this is the peak of Adele. She surprised the entire music industry, and without this album, I think 25 and 30 wouldn't really get all the praise they got. Because once you release an album like 21, you've basically proven that you're a genius in both songwriting and performing, and that's pretty much why I want to put it at number one. Some of my favorite songs in this album would be obviously Rolling in the Deep and Set Fire to the Rain, two of the most epic and elegant songs that Adele ever wrote. But then you also have Don't You Remember, Take It All, One and Only, He Won't Go, and of course, the beautiful, timeless piece of art called Someone Like You, one of the greatest ballads of the 2010s and one of the most nostalgic songs from my childhood. I'm pretty sure that there's no one who's more than 20 years old and less than 30 that doesn't know every single word from this song. It's an amazing track and it's a testament of her incredible ability as both a songwriter and as a performer. And that is going to be pretty much it. This video is going to be way longer than I thought it would be, but honestly, I had a lot of fun making this list. I had a lot of fun making this video, revisiting her discography. Any excuse I can get to go back to those albums I'll take it. If you guys enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed making this video, please go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other videos that I upload. If you want me to make this sort of rankings with any other artist, if you want me to talk about a song or an album, go ahead and leave it down below and I'll make sure to read it and fulfill your request as soon as I can. I hope I can see you soon with a new video, but until then, bye.